Legendary music producer Phil Spector lives the life of a Hollywood king. But when a beautiful actress is found shot to death inside his 33-room castle, it's just the beginning of a case that unfolds over 6 years.
There always seemed to be a back door that the celebrities had a key to for the justice system.
And will reveal a twisted tale of uncontrollable ego and shattered Hollywood dreams.
I knew that Phil played with guns. Play with smoke, you get fire.
Come inside the bizarre and dangerous kingdom of Phil Spector.
Okay, well, Phil, whenever you're ready, we're rolling.
I have no motive.
On March 22, 2005, legendary music producer Phil Spector has his assistant, Michelle Blaine, make a strange videotape. It is a tape he is making for his website, a website he hopes will tell his side of the story.
But it has come time for me to bring out certain circumstances that have been brought to light and have not been brought to light about an incident that happened in my home on February 3rd, 2003.
Because Phil Spector, known for his bizarre ways, is under indictment for a violent death that occurred at his home 2 years earlier.
Okay, and number 2, please.
It's a tragic and scandalous story tailor-made for crime author Aphrodite Jones.
Phil Spector is an A-list executive. He was a product of a world where rock was king. It was part of a generation bigger than any, I think, other generation in terms of musical influence. And so he himself was a mini emperor.
Jones returns to the dark underbelly of Hollywood to unearth new details about the Phil Spector case and expose new and disturbing secrets that span decades. It all starts with a middle-of-the-night phone call to 911.
911, what are you reporting?
Hi, my name is Adriano. I think my boss killed somebody. Please, can you send me
You think your boss killed somebody?
Yes, yeah. Because I'm a driver, I'm waiting outside and I don't know what.
And why do you believe he may have killed somebody?
Because you have a lady on the floor and he has a gun in his hand.
Okay, stay on the line. Do not hang up.
The frightened caller is Adriana D'Souza, Spector's driver.
Did you hear him shoot her or anything?
Yeah, I heard like a noise and then he opened the door and I think I killed her. And then I'm outside the castle.
Okay, stay on the line. Do not hang up.
Okay, and your name, sir?
Adriano.
Okay, and your boss's name?
It's Phil Spector.
I'm sorry?
Phil Spector.
How did music legend Phil Spector wind up with a woman dead at his castle? His evening began typically enough hours earlier. He leaves his Alhambra mansion at about 7 p.m. He's going to meet a date at the Grill on the Alley, an upscale Beverly Hills restaurant. After dinner, he drives her back to her residence and then heads back to the Grill to pick up his second date that night, a server at the restaurant. Spector and the second date drive to Trader Vic's, one of his favorite haunts.
Phil doesn't like to be alone. I know it seems like he does because he lived alone in that huge castle, but he liked to have that presence that he was important, and it made him feel important to have somebody with him.
Phil Spector's longtime personal assistant, Michelle Blaine, has known and admired Spector since she was a child. She has unique access to his mysterious and dark inner world.
What was your relationship with Mr. Spector?
With Phil, it was a 24/7 job. It's like taking care of a child. So he could call me at 11 o'clock at night asking me to get him his table at Trader Vic's or whatever he needed in the moment. And Phil's a night owl. He didn't get up until 2 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes, and go straight from there to his hair appointment, and then have me plan his social calendar for the evening.
Next stop, Phil and the second date arrive at Dan Tana's, another Hollywood locale where people go to be seen. After having drinks, it's a little after midnight. By now, Phil's been at it for 5 hours. He's headed to the House of Blues on Sunset Boulevard. Spector is greeted by a blonde bombshell at the front door of the VIP Foundation room. Her name is Lana Clarkson. Lana is a stunning 40-year-old actress and model who catches Phil's wandering eye immediately.
They called her a bouncer, too. Not only was she the hostess, but she was a big girl. She was tall, in her heels, over 6 foot.
Lana's good friend, fellow Hollywood actress Pam Krause, recounts that night.
What happened the night that Phil Spector went there? He was already on pills, and he was already on a lot of alcohol. And when he got there and he went upstairs, he was wearing one of his notorious wigs that he always has on. And Lana thought that he was a girl. And she said to him, "Ma'am, you can't come in here." And he got very upset. And somebody else that was working there said, "Oh, Lana, no, this is Phil Spector. He's very important. He's a VIP. You have to take very good care of him."
A nervous Clarkson tries to make it right. She makes sure he gets plenty of attention.
She was buzzing around him doing her job. At the end of the evening, when it was time to close up, Lana went downstairs to get her car. It was about 2:30 in the morning. She was walking along the street. Phil Spector followed and said, "Come on, Lana, come with me. Oh, come on, please. Come to my castle. Come to my castle, just for one drink."
This grainy footage captured by the House of Blues security cameras shows Lana Clarkson getting into Phil Spector's chauffeured car. It's 2:30 in the morning. They are the last known images of her alive. At 5:10 a.m., police arrive at Spector's castle and find Lana Clarkson dead of a gunshot wound to the mouth. They arrest a stunned and belligerent Phil Spector and take him to the Alhambra police station. Officers who interact with him report he slurs his words and reeks of alcohol. The police make a recording of their interrogation of Spector.
Absolute nonsense. He's a piece of and I don't know what her problem was. If you still want no right to come to my castle, blow her head open and say a murder. What the is wrong with you people?
While Phil is in custody awaiting his lawyer, police begin a thorough investigation of the grisly death scene. Not far from Lana Clarkson's body, a single cabinet drawer is partially pulled open. Inside, an empty holster that appears to be a match for the gun that killed her. That gun, a Colt revolver, is found nearby. A search of the house yields 9 more firearms, including 2 additional blue steel Colt revolvers. In the bathroom off the foyer, investigators find a bloody cloth and a wet hand towel on the sink. Lana's blood is also found on a door handle, on the stairway banister, and on one of Spector's coats found hanging in an upstairs closet. But nobody's fingerprints are found on the gun. Meanwhile, as Phil Spector continues to rant at the police, his bail is set at $1 million.
And he could come out and run through my house and climbing down like a pig, and while somebody's dying there, and and then it scared the out of everybody that somebody commits suicide.
Phil Spector's used to being treated like a king. Now he is blind with rage. He turns to the only person he can trust in this terrible predicament, the woman Adriano De Sousa called before he called 911, Michelle Blaine.
Come to Mr. Philip's house. I think he killed a lady. Please call me back. I'm gonna call the police right now. Thank you.
Adriano left me a kind of a crazy message that I didn't believe when I first heard it, that came in at about 4 or 5 in the morning, and I listened to it and I'm like, dead lady? I had left my phone in the car, which was so unusual for me because at this point I'd been working for him for some time.
Spector makes his $1 million bail. He meets Michelle and they check into the 5-star Bel Air Hotel.
You were very careful to protect Phil Spector.
Right. We ended up at the Hotel Bel Air in hiding for almost 7 days or 8 days, I think, while the house was being wrangled by the sheriff's department, and he couldn't go back there, and I got stuck again as being the babysitter. And that was pretty frightening because he was in a state of mind that was not well at all. It was like, okay, what happened? Who is this person that died at your house? He looked at me, he's like, I don't know what happened. It was an accident. And I said, well, what was an accident? What was an accident? She had a gun with her? What happened? How did the gun? I don't know. It was an accident. In the moment, I felt like I was caring for this child that was in big trouble. And I didn't know what kind of trouble and how am I going to help you?
As the months pass, Spector takes up residence at his beloved Alhambra castle and resumes some semblance of a normal life. He taunts Lana Clarkson in interviews and tells anyone that will listen that she committed suicide that night, even kissing the gun. By no means a household name, Lana still had some measure of success, appearing in movies, television series, and commercials. But as she's grown older, her career has stalled. On Christmas 2001, Lana breaks both of her wrists in an accident that requires multiple surgeries and keeps her away from acting for over a year. At the time, friends observe she seemed depressed. Was she in a dark state of mind the night she meets Phil Spector and goes back to his castle? Whether a suicide, a homicide, or a tragic accident, Phil Spector is about to face the fight of his life. It's been 7 months since the shooting death of actress Lana Clarkson at the home of music producer Phil Spector. Out on $1 million bail, Spector is residing in his Alhambra mansion while the investigation continues. But things are about to change for Phil Spector. On September 22, 2003, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office officially rules Lana Clarkson's death a homicide. 2 months later, on November 20th, music icon Phil Spector is charged with murder. He pleads not guilty. Until the night Lana Clarkson was shot to death in his home, Phil Spector's life seemed to epitomize the American success story. He was born in the Bronx and moves to Los Angeles at 13, 4 years after his father tragically commits suicide. He has his first hit record at 18 with his band The Teddy Bears. The title of his first song, To Know Him Is to Love Him, is taken from the epitaph on his father's tombstone. But Spector can't make it as a performer because he suffers from severe stage fright, so he turns his attention to producing. A phenomenal success and a musical innovator, he makes his first million before he turns 21.
Did this album. He's a 33 and a third.
Drummer Hal Blaine, a rock and roll studio legend and father of Spector's former assistant Michelle Blaine, first worked with Spector in the early 60s, a part of his signature musical style, the Wall of Sound.
He became one of the biggest producers as a young guy. One of the biggest producers in the world because those records were all going to number ones.
He says that even at the height of Spector's success, there were often signs that something was amiss.
Did Phil Spector have any true friends?
I don't know if he really did. The only friends that I know of were working relationship friends.
But in terms of a true friend, a buddy, a confidant?
I'm saying that I have no idea.
I mean, there wasn't anyone that you knew of in the 30 years?
No one that I knew of. That was real close, buddy, give me a hug.
Didn't that strike you as a little bit strange?
That was Phil.
Professionally, Spector remains on fire. He's behind an amazing 20 hits over a 3-year period. Classics like Then He Kissed Me, Be My Baby, and To Do Ron Ron. One of the acts Spector signs to his record label is the New York City all-girl group, the Ronettes. Under his guidance, the Ronettes quickly become an international sensation. Phil even marries one of the Ronettes, Veronica, who becomes known as Ronnie Spector. Former Ronette Nedra Ross remembers the whirlwind when Spector came in and transformed their lives.
From doing shows in New York City to going to England, where the headline of the paper was Ronette's Arrive. I'm like, New York City, you don't get no paper that says that you've hit town. But it was sort of like when the Beatles came to America, the Beatles arrived. That's what it was for us when we went to England.
But it's also there that Nedra and the Ronettes get an early introduction to just how bizarre Phil Spector can be.
When Phil came to England, we were already there, and he came, and he decided that he was going to speak in a different voice. He decided to speak in this high-pitched voice. And so we were so embarrassed. I mean, he was at the top of the game. There was no reason. So that told me something was wrong right then.
The rock superstars of the day seek out Phil Spector, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. They all want to work with him. But tastes change, and as the 70s wear on, Phil Spector's career begins to fade. Rumors about the darker side of his personality are almost as legendary as his hit-making reputation. His marriage to Ronnie turns abusive. He keeps her locked in their mansion like a prisoner and threatens her with violence. Other stories involve Spector intimidating people with guns.
I saw Phil personally have guns. We'd be in a restaurant, and for some reason, people would want to pick on him. It really wasn't his fault. People would want to pick on him. And they're thinking, oh, this little guy is talking back. Okay, let's see what we're going to do with this. He goes, I'll meet you outside. I'll meet you outside. So he goes outside. These guys are like, okay, we're ready for you, little guy. And he steps back. Gun comes out. Bodyguards step up. There was Phil, going, go ahead. I pay them. I have money. I control them. Finish it off. I knew that Phil played with guns. And you play with something long enough, play with smoke, you get fire.
It seems to me that somebody like that is extremely insecure.
Very much so. I think a lot of it comes from his childhood and his upbringing. I think he had a really raw deal coming into it, and his mother was a little nuts, his sister a little nuts. Phil was the small child, growing up. He didn't have a loving, nurturing, caring environment, according to Phil.
By the 1990s, Phil Spector retreats from the public eye and walls himself into a 33-room mansion he calls the Castle in Alhambra, California, a not-so-glamorous suburb of Los Angeles. For a man compelled to control everything around him, Spector's life has become almost unbearable as he waits to go on trial for murder. Behind his castle walls, he grows increasingly upset with the negative news coverage. His trusted assistant, Michelle Blaine, has exclusive access to the strange behavior of a man who clearly lives in his own world.
He reached out to a lot of people after Lana's death, trying to get some type of support, and most of them were music-related people. Nobody returned his calls. Nobody wanted to be involved, and trying to explain that to him was like trying to talk to a 5-year-old. Phil, these people are famous. They're not going to reach out to you when you haven't spoken to him anyway in probably 20 years. You're not their friend.
A frustrated Spector hatches a scheme to go around the media and get his side out to the world.
Tell me about the videotape that you made of Phil Spector after the fact when he was trying to explain away what happened to Lana.
He wanted his side of the story out there. And Michelle, here's what I want you to do. I want you to set up a website. I'm going to do it myself. Since the press won't listen to me, nobody will listen to me, I'm going to put it on the internet because everybody then can come and see it. And I want you to make that happen.
Michelle operates the camera for what will become a stunning series of rants.
I show up to shoot him, and he looked insane. Hawaiian shirt, puka shells, like he's on his way on vacation. Okay, this is what you're going to show the world, how you're innocent?
She has given Aphrodite Jones unprecedented access to the videotapes.
To those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Phil Spector. In every famous crime trial, What is the most important thing that one has to have in order to be found guilty of any crime? That is M-O-T-I-V-E, motive. Now, what her motive was for taking her own life, I don't know, and I really don't care.
As Spector is making his tapes, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office is preparing to take him to trial.
Thank you.
Deputy District Attorney Alan Jackson is the leading prosecutor in the case. He is determined not to let celebrity get in the way of justice for Lana Clarkson and her family.
This is a murder defendant, and that's all he is. I don't care about the music, I don't care about the producing, I don't care about the celebrity appeal that he has, I don't care about the friends that he has, I don't care about the money. All I care about is the evidence that we have that proves he's guilty, and that's it.
One of the things that seemed to become banter amongst media, people like Jay Leno, etc., was no celebrity gets convicted in Los Angeles.
We all recognize that. That was the elephant in the room that nobody wanted to talk about. Celebrities are very difficult to convict. There always seemed to be a back door that the celebrities had a key to for the justice system. And we were bound and determined to try this case exactly like we'd try any other case, and that's what we did.
Through legal maneuvering involving the hiring and firing of his defense teams, Phil Spector is managing to delay his trial.
Somebody comes to your house, takes their own life, and you're put on trial. And that's the way it's happened. And for 2 years, nobody has come to my defense. I've lost my reputation. I've lost all my friends, which were not my friends to begin with. I can't work. Nobody asks me for my autograph for the right reasons. Everybody stares at me.
But prosecutors believe the sad fate of Lana Clarkson is the last heinous act in a 30-year pattern of behavior that was building to an inevitable violent climax. And they are about to use Phil Spector's past to tell a story so twisted it will shock the nation. The murder trial of music industry kingpin Phil Spector is underway. His defense claims Lana Clarkson's tragic death in 2003 is a suicide, but the prosecution paints a darker picture of murder.
You're going to be introduced to evidence about his pattern of violence, his history of pulling guns on unarmed women.
A media circus has descended on the criminal courts building in downtown Los Angeles. Trial watchers are enthralled with the spectacle, and Phil Spector seems to be playing to the carnival atmosphere, arriving for court every day surrounded by bodyguards and always dressed in an array of outfits and wild hairstyles. He hires flamboyant defense attorney Bruce Cutler, perhaps best known for representing mobster John Gotti. Prosecutor Alan Jackson remembers the odd behavior.
With the bodyguards and the flourishes, the suits. And at one point, I think I looked over and counted as many as 7 lawyers standing on the other side. He felt like the more folks I get on my side, the more I will beat the prosecution.
The physical evidence will play a crucial role, starting with the unusual nature of the gunshot wound.
It was an intraoral gunshot wound. In other words, the gun was actually inside her mouth when it was fired. That in and of itself doesn't tell you much until you start putting together the ballistics evidence, the blood spatter evidence. We know that she was back in a prone position, backing away from whatever it was that was happening at the time. Clearly what was happening is Phil Spector had a gun in her face and she was backing away.
The night Lana Clarkson was killed, Spector was wearing a white jacket. Investigators found it hanging in an upstairs closet. On it were tiny specks of Clarkson's blood. Lana's blood was also found on the door handle, on a cloth in the bathroom, and inside Spector's pants pocket. Prosecutors say this indicates Spector was close enough to the victim to have held the gun in her mouth when the shot was fired. Despite the damning blood evidence, the defense says Phil Spector couldn't have killed Lana Clarkson because she did it herself.
Lana Clarkson had never been in the house before. How would she know that he owned a gun, number one? And if she did know that he owned a gun, how would she know where he kept it? There was exactly one drawer open, one drawer, in that entire 8, 9, 10,000 square foot house. One drawer was open. It happened to be the drawer that Phil Spector kept his gun in. She would have absolutely no way of knowing that.
Even so, the defense calls a number of acquaintances of Clarkson's to the stand to establish her state of mind, to show that her acting career had hit some rough spots and that she had been having money troubles.
By presenting Lana Clarkson as a B actress who was washed up, who had to work as a hostess and had no money. And therefore, because she seemed depressed and wrote a few emails about maybe I should chuck it all, she wanted it over. It's common for the defense to come up with that kind of thing. They re-victimize the victim, however, in so doing, as well as the victim's family, which is, for me, a very despicable element of these kind of crime stories.
Friend Pam Krause felt compelled to come to Lana's defense.
You think of the portrait that started to get painted of Lana after her death. It was so upsetting for everybody that loved her and knew her that the things that they were saying about her were so untrue. They tried to make her look like a trollop, like somebody who slept around and didn't care about her life and herself, and it just wasn't true.
Lana Clarkson had gone to his house for a drink. She was networking. She was seated by the back door. Her shoes were on. Her jacket was on.
Well, she had her handbag across her shoulder.
And when do you put your handbag on? When you're ready to leave. That's what she was doing. He felt like he lost control, so he reverted to the exact same thing that he's done time and time and time and time and time again. He reached for the closest gun.
Fear of losing control is something that has haunted Spector for years. His newfound notoriety is bringing all the old stories back. Several witnesses, some reluctantly, come forward telling investigators about Spector pulling guns and holding them against their will.
I have an Uzi here, and I am going to kill you.
Many of the allegations are from women Spector has dated in the past.
He was screaming the F word, and you're not leaving. It was like he was demonic.
All 5 women established a very defined pattern of conduct that the defendant had engaged in over the better part of 30 years.
He was holding the revolver and smacked me in the side of the head and said, "I told you to get the F back in the house."
But in personal assistant Michelle Blaine's exclusive tapes, Spector is not buying the women's stories.
They've made me out to be this heinous, crazy, insane, psychotic person, yet I managed to raise a 22-year-old daughter who's beautiful, who's a straight-A student, and doing just fine, thank you. I have no problems with my life, and yet these people are out to destroy me.
As the trial winds down, the prosecution seems to have everything going their way. They bring out their star witness, Spector's driver, Adriano D'Souza, whom Phil confessed to that night.
He had a gun in his hand. I think my boss killed somebody.
But when you're in a situation like Adriano D'Souza was in, your boss walks out with blood on his hand holding a gun, you're going to listen to what he says. And that's going to be ingrained in your head. And when he said those 5 words, I think I killed somebody, Adriano D'Souza will never forget those words.
The 2 sides rest their case. As deliberations begin, a guilty outcome seems almost inevitable.
I thought when we went into that jury room, we'd probably go in for a couple of hours, have lunch, get our lunch, come back the next day, give him the verdict guilty. That's what I thought. I mean, it was so obvious to me this guy did it.
Ricardo Enriquez is a juror at the Spector trial. After 7 grueling months of testimony, he is about to get the surprise of his life.
I asked the foreman if we could at least take an initial poll as to where we stood. So the vote was 4 guilty, 5 not guilty, and 3 undecided. And at the end of that day, I went home, holy crap. I thought this was going to be a slam dunk.
Why did all those people think he was not guilty?
Well, they said there wasn't enough evidence. They couldn't draw the conclusion and come up with their own opinion based on the evidence presented. They wanted proof, actual proof.
After 12 days of deliberation, the jury reports that it is hopelessly deadlocked. The vote is 10-2 in favor of conviction, but the final 2 holdouts aren't budging. Judge Larry Fidler declares a mistrial. For those who loved Lana Clarkson, it's a devastating result.
The evidence was overwhelming. He said he did it. He had the gun. The blood was there. She was dead. Nobody else was in the house. How hard is that? It was a no-brainer. We thought that it was a slam dunk.
And for prosecutor Alan Jackson, it is a stunning defeat.
The memory of Lana Clarkson counted on us to do the right thing, and we weren't going to fail her. Phil Spector was going to stand trial another day in another courtroom. He wasn't simply going to walk away. We weren't going to give up. We could outlast him.
But the story of the Phil Spector murder trial is far from over. Jackson and his team will not rest until there is justice for Lana Clarkson and her loved ones. But how will they convince another jury that Phil Spector is a guilty man? In September 2007, 4 years after Lana Clarkson is found dead in Phil Spector's Alhambra Castle, the Spector murder trial ends shockingly with a hung jury and a mistrial. For the prosecution and Lana Clarkson's friends and family, it is a dark time. Determined to reverse what he feels is a miscarriage of justice, Deputy District Attorney Alan Jackson announces that the DA's office will seek to retrial Spector as quickly as possible. Jackson feels that the main holdout juror that caused the mistrial may have had an overly rigid definition of reasonable doubt.
I was told by one of the jurors from trial number 1 that the holdout was an engineer who just couldn't wrap his head around the idea that because you didn't show it on a videotape, somehow or another it was possible that Lana killed herself.
We had a blueprint that we believed established beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any doubt, that Phil Spector killed Lana Clarkson. We simply had a juror who I believe held us to too high a standard, too high a burden. And from what I understand, he constantly went back to, but we don't know what happened inside the foyer. And the other jurors would say, yes, we do. There's direct and circumstantial evidence explaining exactly what happened in the foyer. And that juror would come back and say, it's possible that X, Y, and Z could have happened. And the other jurors would say, but it's not reasonable to believe that. It was based on conversations like that that I knew I wasn't going to change anything in the second trial. Why? Because I couldn't have convinced that juror of anything beyond a reasonable doubt. That juror, I believe, put our burden of beyond a reasonable doubt just simply out of reach.
13 months later, on October 29, 2008, opening statements are made in Phil Spector's second trial for the murder of Lana Clarkson.
You did not have to prosecute Phil Spector once, but twice.
There is a dynamic and an energy that's attendant to every single trial, and every trial is different. And one of the challenges that I had was to bring back that energy. I knew that the 12 people sitting in that box had never heard this evidence before. I knew they didn't know word one about what we were going to present to them.
For the new trial, there's less of a media presence. The trial is not carried on live TV, and Spector is represented by a new attorney, Doran Weinberg.
One of the things that happened in the first trial that people really were sort of aghast was he wore, or donned an incredible afro and had a very elaborate costume, if you will, type of look about him. Did you ever advise him to tone it down?
Philip is Philip, and the jury probably needs to understand that in order to understand him. So the fact that he was different, eccentric, strange, we weren't going to hide that. We didn't think we should, but we did think that some of the variety should be toned down. And the one thing I told him, he could dress as he wanted, and he could be Philip, but I wanted one hairstyle selected and stayed with, and he agreed to that.
Once again, the physical evidence leads the way for the prosecution. Deputy District Attorney Truck Doe joins the prosecution team for the second trial.
If we could talk specifically about what it is in the forensics that tells us proof positive. It could not have been a suicide. It was a homicide.
The blood spatter evidence in the case definitively put Mr. Spector within arm's reach of Lana Clarkson, with his arms pointed in the direction of her face. The spatter on his jacket proved that, and the gunshot to Miss Clarkson proved that the gun was upright. And finally, and most importantly, the blood spatter on the back of her wrist was proof that she could not have held that gun when it went off in her mouth.
I did not have anything to do with her death. She may have accidentally taken her own life. She may have purposefully taken her own life. She may have been eating the gun with her, dancing. She may have been doing anything. I don't know why, when, how, or where, in what circumstance she may have taken her own life, whether she planned to or not.
It is these kinds of contradictions that begin to alarm Spector's loyal assistant Michelle Blaine while she is shooting his defensive videotapes.
I looked at him differently after this experience, and it was very like, I'd try to catch him in lies now.
As crime writer Aphrodite Jones digs deeper into this story, she discovers that Phil Spector would go to any lengths to clear his name.
Are you saying that Phil Spector tried to marry you?
Yes, I am. Phil told me that he thought it would be a good idea, since I'd been privy to too much information about the Lana Clarkson case, that I had too much to offer, and that if he married me, I wouldn't be able to testify against him.
Because a spouse can't testify against their husband?
Apparently, yeah. And I told him, no, we don't need to do that. It's fine. I work for you. I think that that's enough. And I'm loyal to a fault.
I sat in the trial and I looked at Phil Spector and I studied him really closely. He's a mini-man in real life, wears platform shoes because he's extremely short. That's what all the tall hair is about. Again, an attempt to elevate himself. He deliberately wears costumes and clothing and elevated shoes, etc., to create an illusion and smoke and mirrors of some kind of king or prince. He's not.
The second trial proceeds much like the first. Spector's violent past with women and the forensics tell a disturbing tale.
It was all very much a singular voice of a singular story. That Mr. Spector, when he's drinking, loses control and a woman wants to leave, pulls out a gun.
Even Michelle Blaine, his only true confidant, fears for her safety around a tortured Spector.
He was getting increasingly more nasty with me. I wasn't getting along with him, and I wasn't believing, after I had shot everything in March of 2005 and had all those conflicting stories, it was weighing on me a bit, and the craziness of the trial upcoming and my kids. I was done. I couldn't be involved in his crazy world anymore.
Closing arguments have been made in his murder retrial, and he is now at the mercy of the jury.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Philip Spector, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Lana Clarkson.
On April 13th, 2009, over 6 years since the death of Lana Clarkson, Phil Spector is found guilty of second-degree murder. They also find him guilty of using a firearm in committing a crime. Spector receives the news with no reaction. A month later, Phil Spector is sentenced to 19 years to life in prison, a virtual life sentence for a frail 69-year-old man.
With this verdict and this sentence, a message has been sent. And no matter your fame or your wealth or your supposed celebrity, you will stand trial and you will be accountable for your actions.
For prosecutor Alan Jackson, it is justice served at last.
What is it that you did differently in the second trial?
We knew we had a good case. We knew that he was guilty, and we knew if we picked the right jury, they would find him guilty.
Retrial juror Irma Soto Lopez finds the prosecution's evidence undeniable.
At the end, when we first walked in, the straw poll was 6 guilty, 2 not guilty, and 4 undecided.
Your job as a jury is to not make a decision beyond a shadow of a doubt, but rather with reasonable doubt.
Yes. That's when we said, okay, we're going to go one piece at a time. We're going to go witness in order. And we did. We went through to really come to the only verdict we possibly could. And within all 12 reasonable thinking individuals, the verdict had to be guilty.
You all know that we believe that the result in this case was the wrong result.
Spector's attorney, Doran Weinberg, still defends his client.
Oh, he's waved guns. Waved guns, I'm telling you, he's waved guns at people. There's no question about that. He probably waved guns at one or two of the women who testified. But what I'm saying is he never shot anybody, he never shot a gun at anybody, and I frankly cannot imagine Phil Spector putting a gun in someone's mouth and blowing somebody's head off.
Despite his iconic musical legacy, Phil Spector has left years of hurt and violence in his wake, which finally led to murder. Lana Clarkson is gone forever.
People loved Lana, and they felt that she was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off her back, no matter what, and that was an honest, fair shooter who cared deeply about the lives of those around her. It's a tragedy that she had to be sacrificed in such a way.
It's tragic all around because you have a woman who lost her life in a brutal way and a family that continues to mourn her loss and, can't reach or get close to closure until they see the man responsible for her death behind bars. It was a long wait for justice, but ultimately we achieved it.
It was my job to bring Lana to life as best I could. That was not hard. Lana's a wonderful, wonderful person, someone whom I regret mightily that I never got a chance to meet. I've lived with Lana for the better part of 4 years, and I've grown to know her in a way that I don't think I've ever known another victim. I still get emotional when I think about her and the loss to her friends, to her family, and to our community. We lost a wonderful, wonderful girl.
And ultimately, Michelle Blaine is also a victim. She is crushed by the man who she once believed in and worked so hard to defend.
Did he break your spirit?
For a second, but not anymore. It hurt me more than it really broke my spirit. It hurt me that somebody that I really cared a lot about, that was like a family member to us and would buy my kids birthday gifts, would send birthday cards, my daughter Tempest could tell you, she called him Uncle Phil. It was somebody that I spent so much time with. When I finally left in September of 2005, he had a hissy fit, literally like a stomping kid. You can't leave. I'm not giving you permission to quit. You don't get to quit. I'll fire you when I'm finished. And I told him that I'm absolutely leaving. And my son, the big kid, Josh, he's 6'4"-ish. And Josh stood up and said, okay, we're leaving. And we started down the hallway and Phil screamed at me, you're effing fired, And as I'm down the stairs with my son, I hear him say, I should have killed you. It was the last thing out of his mouth.
To escape his tormented youth and small stature, Phil Spector created his own world where he is king.
He wanted to be the king of his serfdom, so he could sit on the top of the hill in that suburb and look down among everyone and say, I've got the biggest house, I am your king. Everybody else was a servant. They were all subservient in Phil Spector's life.
But even a king eventually has to play by society's rules. His maniacal behavior cost a vibrant woman her life and hurt so many others.
Greetings, I'm Phil Spector. Welcome to my castle. I have no idea where the servants are. I think they're out robbing other houses.
Phil Spector is now serving his time in Corcoran State Prison, not the kind of castle in which this would-be emperor thought he would spend his old age.